All right. I will also share my tab that's open if in case it helps. Um, It'd be a great feature in Jitsi if they allowed us to, um, swap out Etherpads on the fly. Um, I mean, this isn't a Jitsi feature. It's a Jitsi and Etherpad combination called MeetPad. But yeah, swapping out Etherpads would be really cool. Um, So let's continue. So when you set a QoS option, one of the things that I noticed was that as a side effect of actually setting QoS on an export, QoS is actually being set even cluster wide. And so that I think is a limitation that we can work around. Um, and what that means is that you have some exports that can have QoS policies and some exports that you don't need QoS policies on. But the way it works today with NFS Ganesha is that there is a cluster-wide QoS that starts applying, which means that all exports have QoS policies at that point, and it might lead to unintended consequences if given our model of allowing multi-tenant access to a Ganesha cluster and so on. So I think that as a workaround for this, it would be to try to have the maxes set on the cluster, and then to have a export level QoS as well that can be configured through QoS types. So as the driver starts up, if we detect that we are seeing QoS settings, we could go ahead and set the maximums against the cluster. So to just signal that yes, QoS is being enforced, which means that all exports have the maximum available QoS settings at the very beginning, and then when QoS policies start applying to individual exports, which means individual shares, we would end up refining those QoS settings specifically for those exports on in the Ganesha configuration. Um, that's that's the one design issue that I thought we should get out first. So that basically, yeah, I mean, we have a couple of ways of doing this, and I've not really thought through what's a good method as such. I mean, what we could set the cluster level QoS when the first share is created, instead of at the driver start time. Basically, doing it at driver start time is so that we can bundle this and isolate it rather than trying to slow down the first consumption with an extra call. Although this call is pretty pretty quick. It's just setting some configuration and returning. Um, and so it doesn't really have that kind of drain. So whatever we do, we'd consider doing this because of the way Ganesha behaves today. Um, yeah, we also had a discussion around supporting extra specs versus QoS types, or should we do both? One one of the things was the before QoS types happened. I think the approach was to try and isolate everything with scoped extra specs, right? So we had a QoS support flag, which was a common capability. Didn't do much. We were trying to build on top of that common capability, but I don't think that materialized over the years. Because vendor drivers and all the drivers in tree preferred having scoped extra specs because there were some differences between the way QoS concepts applied between these backends. And so you had to make sure that these extra specs were scoped so that they could have their own individual reserved keywords and so on. So I don't see a big reason why after we've had QoS types that a driver has to now add support for scoped extra specs. It just is, I guess, a little confusing to our operator experience if we continue to do that. And so if when we're doing this with CephFS, my proposal is to not use the scoped extra specs for this and just latch onto QoS types. And what that would mean is we'll have a standard sort of set of specs. We have two controls here: bandwidth and IOPS. and bandwidth can be broken into read and write. There is a combined bandwidth, flag, but I don't see it bringing a whole lot of value again to us, because I mean we're just avoiding spelling these out together, right? Like, so if you want to set the read bandwidth to a particular value and the write bandwidth to the same value, you'll get the same approach as the combined bandwidth control. But I guess what's a little more interesting would be the right bandwidth, controlling the right bandwidth and so on. So that's why exposing the individual toggles made sense. Um, so yeah, that's all there is to speak about this. This is a pretty simple feature as the user experience is built on top of this, and that's kind of what we want to preserve even in the Manila space, right? So because we have a pretty mature um, treatment of how QoS is supposed to work with Manila, we just want to make sure that pattern applies to this new driver feature as well. I don't see any other uh, you know contentious points. But is there any are there any questions, any suggestions?
So, Gautam, I don't think there is any minimum support yet, right? So I don't think this question may apply. But if that happens, so there are two ways to grant kind of IOPS on the storage side, right, from the storage side, because we have a quota of IOPS, and then we kind of do the budgeting based on the requirement on the workload side. I think this is only max IOPS, so it doesn't matter. But if it becomes min IOPS as well, there is either depending on the total capacity versus used capacity, those type of things also come into picture. So is that something that is planned to be supported in future, or is it something
I think so.
depending on
Mhm.
what is your demand? Yeah, okay, got it.
Yeah, I think so. I've not seen the design specs land in either in an FS Ganesha or directly on Ceph around this stuff. But I think these were the first initial attempts at making sure there was a QoS um, capability in this stack. So I guess they are working towards the minimums as well. So I'll keep an eye and we'll bring it to a future PTG.
Got it. Okay.
I think an interesting proposal for us in Manila would be like, to reduce the operator burden. I mean, how do we communicate this and how do we document this kind of thing? I mean, it is a set and uh, forget sort of a thing. It is like share type extra specs, but my concern is around discoverability. Like, unless you read the documentation, you don't really know what, for example, the NetApp driver exposes or the Dell EMC driver exposes in terms of QoS or what's possible. And so that's still the concern even with this new driver implementation. We're just latching on to what's available, but I think that's an area of improvement for us in the Manila team, um, to try and have this advertised somehow programmatically discoverable from so that operators have a better experience around this. So I'm open to ideas over there if you have suggestions, or if it's a minor problem, let us know too. Like it probably is not as big as I'm making it out to be.
So I think the use cases are the bully volume scenarios right here that we are trying to resolve
Yeah, pretty much.
pretty much. And what happens, if there are say five shares which have the upper cap versus the shares that do not have any max IOPS defined? They are pretty much like they can actually use or consume any amount of IOPS, or is it like still capped
Uh,
by some kind
so
of
it's going to be, I mean, infrastructure dependent, right? At that point, so I think what's getting enforced is directly on the storage side, and from what I can tell, this is the minimum enforced versus the maximum enforced for bandwidth and the same for IOPS. But there's no telling that it in case you're network limited, or disk limited in some way, that these numbers are not even applying, right? So that could be one aspect of it. um, and the other is, if you are having QoS caps for some, and not for the others, I would think it's intentional, that the sum is probably some workloads that you want to limit, right, in some sense. And so you've onboarded a client that has a lower priority than the rest of your workloads, and so you want to make sure that that client is not taking away more than its slice, kind of thing. Um, so that's where I see the maximums applying. I don't know if some of the other advanced implementations, like for example the ones in NetApp driver, for instance, with the minimums, the floors, I think there is a little more flexibility on what to do, and so you can design a strategy around it in your cloud. But for this, I think having these controls is a good first step. Um, trying to
Got it.
trying to dissuade bad actors. Awesome. All right. Thank you for those questions. Anything else before we move on to the next one?
Nope. Seems pretty detailed. Thanks for working on it. And yeah, I do agree that shared the QS types is a better approach for this. So yeah, thanks for putting this together.
No
Looks great.
problem. Hey, Carlos, and I'm recording, but I can drop the recording whenever we can conclude the recording of this topic and then take over again.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, otherwise I would miss some big piece of the recording. So thanks for
No
taking
problem.
over and the recording.
No problem. All right, I can jump to the next one, which is erasure coded pools. And I think we have Francesco here. So I actually didn't add the testing notes on this, but he's gotten started with the testing stuff. So I might put him on the spot and talk through it. Um, but at the very whatever outset, we today don't have a whole lot of controls exposed in Manila to talk about Ceph pools. For us, when Manila started supporting Ceph, it was a single pool kind of an interaction back then. So it was a file system that lived on a single pool, and we were just exposing that out of Manila and so on. But today you can actually create your file system and then add multiple pools, and then you can organize your sub volumes on top of those, on that pool structure, however you would like it. And all of this is actually transparent to a couple of things. One being the management path that we are using to create, manipulate these subvolumes, and also the authorization aspect of it, which is that, I mean, even to create authorize these things, we're creating CephX credentials. So the credentials, they're pool aware. They work with whatever has been configured as the pools on the file system layer and so on. And the reason we're thinking about adding any support for pool awareness right now is because of this fast and growing use case of using erasure coded pools. What are erasure coded pools? Well, in Ceph, by default, you had the concept of replicated pools. So your data that you would write would be written 3x into the cluster for redundancy, and so you could lose you could lose some of that, the pool disks, the pool nodes could go down, but the data is still intact and accessible. It's a kind of fault tolerance that Ceph has had. And a long time ago, I think, I mean, it's been years now. I think about 7 years the since the Luminous release, where the concept of erasure coded pools started showing up. Erasure coding brings another algorithmic approach to layering your data, to writing your data, and so you don't really need to replicate 3x. Instead, you can use an algorithm that kind of creates chunks and parity blocks, and so that you can reduce the amount of redundancy for your data. But in case you do lose your infrastructure for something, you can basically calculate that data back with the help of the same way you actually encoded and stored your data. You can bring it back with the help of the chunks and the parity blocks. So there was a lot of improvements in this land. So I think there was a disk. I mean, as hardware kept getting different. I mean, kept progressing, and I think also, some of the compute power that improved as well. So there's a concept called fast EC. I won't get into too much details of it because it is interesting, but at the same time, it's something that we don't really have toggles to expose to to Manila users anyway. So what Manila operators would care about is the fact that you should be able to structure your file system in such a way that you can put some of your data into erasure coded pools and some of your data into replicated pools. And with the improvements in Ceph itself and the hardware, you're now seeing more and more of a of an advantage of doing so, of dividing your data up like this. And with the savings that you have, with the amount of disk space that you save, you just end up having the ability to store some more. So that's the underlying reasoning why we'd allow this. But the question we could ask is, is this new and novel, and why are we doing this now? Um, and it's actually a complicated answer there. One is because it was so transparent. I think, I mean, with operations, people were always able to do this with Manila even. So they were able to go add erasure coded pools today. They were able to add, different kinds of pools, maybe, some of those sitting on SSDs versus, other kinds of disk media, and have that be transparent to Manila, period. So you would not see them, you not see the any difference on the Manila management plane. So when you create your sub volumes, which is your Manila shares, when you create access rules, nothing was actually apparent that this data was actually living on different pools on the back end. Um, so I think the change that we want to make is probably trying to reflect that kind of a operator workflow with Manila. Try to make that easier. How would we make that easier? We just expose a pool attribute that you could set via scoped extra spec. So you can direct your provisioning based on based on share types and extra specs, and the extra spec specifically can call out this a pool, and we would then use that to create our sub volumes on this in this FFS driver. So instead of you doing stuff on the back end and it being transparent, you could actually have that configuration live in Manila, and it's a little more dynamic that way because your end users kind of know that they are, because they are the ones that are creating your shares, their shares. They know what kind of share it is, what kind of purpose it's going to be put into, and so they can select a kind of pool to put it into. And with specific context for erasure coding, there are some use cases that this shines for. When you're writing large files, when you're streaming um, data, or when you have archival workloads, those are the kinds that are better suited for erasure coded pools. And so when an end user knows that that's the purpose of their of their share, they can actually request this sort of a data pool instead of a replicated data pool. And this also extends it for other kinds of pool characteristics. So if today you already have a different mechanism for your pools, it's not based on erasure coding or replicated, but it could be based on disk type, for instance. You could expose that with the same mechanism that we're thinking about here. So it's generic enough with that kind of extensibility. That's what I was pitching through this design here. So again, uh, it will be adding an extra spec, so it should not be touching too much much else in the in Manila. There's no API DB scheduler, nothing, none of that. The scheduler does not get involved with scoped extra specs. It ignores them, and it lets the driver pick up and do what it does. And in the driver, we'd be specifying this data pool in when creating subvolumes, and and so on. I mean, we might have an interface into snapshots and things as well. I have to explore that bit, but the driver will handle all of that based on this scoped extra spec. Um, what else? Yeah, I was just looking at, I think, when researching this, I was looking at how people are using this today. I think some of our biggest users, like for example CERN, they've published quite a lot of material for this. They've spoken a lot in different places, and they've shared how they do this, and they've been testing with erasure coded pools for a long time. So they could choose to use this feature and make things a little different if possible, or continue to use their existing workflow, because we are not going to be messing with this if it's not specified, right? So we'll let Ceph decide where to place the volume if you don't specify this data pool layout option. Um, that's all I had for this. But I'll pause here for questions on what to on what EC could be, or on our plan.
Hey, Goram, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, thanks for covering this topic. I think you covered it very well, including the options that we need in Manila to support this new ratio coded way. I just had a couple of lines because in DevStack plugin Ceph, as we discussed in glance last year, we started a patch to separate the way we create replicated and ratio coded pools, and this patch is linked here. It has just been extended to support Manila. In this case, it should be on the Ceph side. This should be aligned to what you just said, which means that we can create new erasure coded pools with the right options, and then at that point, everything is ready from the Ceph point of view, which means that in Manila, we need to have those options that we were describing, like the extra spec setting, pointing to this particular pool, and then we can start layering patches to test this scenario and see what we can do in CI. We can decide to have a different job, a variation of an existing job to just test this feature that is available in Tentable. So last year we just started this conversation, but we weren't in the position of basically start creating a real code that can support this feature. So in general, we have this patch that we can use has been extended from Glance to Manila, so we can test eventually CephFS. The other thing I think you already covered it. We could choose in advance to create a new CephFS created by that is backed by the MDS, right? And we can choose to pass replicated pool for metadata and an erasure coded pool in advance. So you basically gain this new mode from the very beginning. But at that point, um, I don't know if it makes sense all the conversation because we don't need Manila to be aware about what's happening in the backend. While if we explicitly create this extra spec, we can make our life easier in terms of not just relying on the backend, in terms of troubleshooting and maintenance purposes, and we can grow it because in the future, because you can add more than one pool, you can decide which directory sub-tree should be pinned to which pool, and then you can grow this, you can scale it better. So those is just my consideration. Then I assume that, yeah, there is an open question there. We may want to validate the pool exists in the Ceph backend because that's a system, an administrator action that you can automate from the driver point of view, or you shouldn't do that. Especially because Ceph is supposed to be as an external entity that Manila is connecting to. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on this conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for getting that DevStack plugin Ceph change going. I naively just added something to the Manila job over there, so that I could see whether those pools were getting created and such. Without exposing anything in Manila, it would still be very transparent. But yeah, I'll continue, poking at your change. And yeah, when we do this, we'll probably be able to test it. Maybe not with Tempest directly, but with some more extended testing. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
thanks.
Awesome. On this open question, I had some ideas around on the pool name validation and pool validation itself. One of the things I was thinking is that we could expose this to the scheduler. Just it would be something that I mean, because we know what file system is configured for us for a given backend. We kind of can look at the file system info, grab the pools, and put it in the scheduler, and that way the operator knows that these are the pools that are available on the backend for a given backend, and so it bridges the gap between situations where the storage operator is not the same as your OpenStack operator, and so they both know that information because Manila, actually puts it in the scheduler, queries the storage and puts it in the scheduler kinds, and also helps with the validation itself in the driver. So we don't really need to query that or ask Ceph again, because we would have asked for that at the setup time, at the driver setup time. Um, those are some of the thoughts around this. And I had another question. So how important is this pool info to expose back to the user? And this is more around annotating your share after the fact that it's been created and it's been living for a while, right? So how important is do folks have see that aspect, saying this is where my share is, it's on this particular pool. Um, it doesn't really matter, because when you are actually mounting the share or doing any operations, you don't really need to know the name of the pool. What matters is the name of the file system, and and Ceph resolves everything else. And this includes even the NFS Ganesha bits. But I don't know if that metadata helps in any other way that I'm not seeing.
Yeah, I also don't can't foresee anything like that. But if we need it, maybe we can expose it with the other metadata that we already provide. From the CephFS driver, we do already set the FS name to CephFS native share. So maybe we can use a similar mechanism if we need to expose that, and we would add that to the share metadata as part of the share
Yeah.
creation. That could be an approach if we need that. But I can't anticipate any needs for it yet.
Yes, please. I think this was. I'm sorry. I may be misremembering your name.
Yeah, I see unmuted, but I
Oh,
can't
we're not
hear.
hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So yeah, I think for the normal user, it's probably not a good idea to, if he sees too much information, it will just confuse users. Maybe it would be nice if certain people could see it, so maybe via some ACLs that one can put on the stuff to expose this. So that's a bit more configurable from the operator side. By the way, I'm from CERN.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us, and thanks for that. If do you is I mean I suppose you're very familiar with the way this works today with and because you folks have shared how you customize this. Um, so does this layer on top of that easily, or does it interfere with what you're doing?
I think we would have to play a bit around it. It's quite difficult for us to change if we have to. So if you keep backwards compatibility, we're using file systems on Ceph, and we are currently deploying this massively.
Yeah.
Particularly our Ceph teams doing that. And for now, it's working as it is. I'm happy to look at the new developments. We are also a little bit behind with our deployment, so we are now on epoxy, at least. So yeah, let's see.
Awesome.
Much
Thanks.
appreciated.
Yeah, no, thank you for that feedback. And yeah, we'll copy you when we're doing reviews and so on, so you know what's happening. Um, but yeah, uh, would be nice to know if you have any blockers with this kind of thing.
Yep, I will take a look. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. That's all I had for EC as well. Anything else, Carlos?
Nope. Yeah, that's pretty well covered. Thank you.
Thank you. Francesco, anything else before we move to the next one?
No, good for me. Thanks.
Awesome. All right. All right. Switching back, I think the next thing is encryption, and we've spoken about this a little bit here before, and it was again in the same context that there is some work that's going on in NFS Ganesha, and why this is interesting to us is because we've added share encryption. I mean, we had share encryption for a long time, but we added tenant-driven, uh, bring your own key kind of encryption. It is still encryption at rest, and there isn't any other mechanism because I mean, unless we're doing VertiOFS or something, the in-transport encryption mechanism is not the same that we could implement like the way Cinder, Nova today support encryption. Uh, but yeah, even at rest encryption, bring your own key is very super interesting when you have these multi-tenant clouds and tenants would like to control how their data is encrypted at rest. And so I mean, badly wanted something that's testing this workflow at the in the back end, so in the upstream CI, because we've invented quite a lot of new things around that API for this. And I'm glad to hear. I think I mean the NetApp folks have been testing this extensively. They're glad to see that new bugs and extensions are being discovered for this. Um, so to add to around what we're thinking about with CephFS is that this feature is not ready to be consumed. On Ceph itself, things look pretty mature, but driving it from NFS Ganesha did not seem to be something that we could do today, for instance. And so I mean, I could just speak to what I'm seeing as such, but I'm not sure that's helpful, and we may be running out of time, right, Carlos?
Yep, we are 4 minutes
Okay,
over.
we're 4 minutes over already. Okay, so I have some details over here. So if you're interested to talk about this, you know where to reach me, or just add some comments to the Etherpad, and I can catch up on them. But this isn't something that we are probably chasing in the Hibiscus cycle.
Yep. Yeah, thanks for putting this together. Yeah, looking forward to having this, but also, as I said, it's important to have the upstream of first-party CI also testing the workflow. So yeah, I think it's also yet another good reason for us to try pursuing this.
Oops, sorry. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's all I had though. Let me hand it back to you, Carlos.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Um, yeah, there was a last topic there, which is the testing for manage, but it was mostly for closure. We managed the test that we have been willing to merge for a couple of cycles now. So it's being tested on the CI, stable so far, no bugs found. So yeah, that was pretty much the update. I think we can still afford the 5-minute break because I tried to make a little space at the end of today in case like we need it. So I think we can still afford it. But as we have a lot of people in the room, can we take a team picture before we head to the break?
Yes.
Yep. So if
I
you're
can
okay
stop
with it,
sharing
please.
and stop recording. Hold on a sec.